Just a couple of weeks ago on my channel, I created this really sweet painting using Caran D'Ache Neocolor II water-soluble pastels, and you all seem to like it, so much so that you asked me to make another one. So here we are today, painting this Chinese lantern with easy-to-follow steps, and I even provide you with a free outline so that you can trace it down to join in with us. Let's get started. Let's talk about supplies to begin with. You can, of course, join in with watercolour if you want to, but the set that I'm using is from this small set from Caran D'Ache. They're called Neocolor II, and as you can see, I've already removed a few from this little tin here and picked out the colours that we're going to be using today. But this is how they come in this set, and I know you can buy them individually, so if you want to, you don't have to even buy a full set of them. You can just buy them as you need them. I'll talk about the colours that I've chosen in a moment, but the other supplies I'm using are the paper is from Etcher, a clean jar of water and some kitchen paper. I'm using, to begin with, my number 4 sized Snowdrop pointed round from Rosemary & Co, and my Caran D'Ache scribbling palette here. You can use these in multiple ways. You can use them directly onto the paper and activate them with water. They are rather like an Inktense pencil in that way. So you can apply it straight onto the watercolour paper, or you can use them as they are in their natural form and just blend them together this way. Or they're meant to be used by activating them with water, much like Inktense pencils, so you get this lovely watery mix. Now you can directly apply them to the watercolour paper as I've done there, but we're not going to be doing it like that today. We're going to be scribbling them onto this little plastic sheet that I have here. You could actually use watercolour paper in place of this if you don't have it, or I have been told that ordinary chopping boards like these plastic perspex boards you can get will work just as well. Okay, so with my drawing in place, you can see here that I've drawn it out ready. The first thing that we need to do is put our base tone in, and we're going to be scribbling them all on this little palette here. So before we start, just to let you know that the free outline is available on Patreon. It's our free membership level, and all you need to do to grab this, and indeed the reference photo that I'm keeping on screen throughout, is head over to Patreon and you can download them, scribble on the back and just transfer it that way. We provide you with them for free so that you're able to join in with us here in my studio. Okay, so let's make a start. When we're looking at the lantern, you can see that there are different shifts in tone with that green tone. There's a bluey green tone in this kind of area, and there's more of a lime green tone everywhere else. So we need to get that on first of all. I'm going to use yellow green, and we're just going to apply it onto the palette like this. I'm going to take yellow, just plain old yellow, and I'm also going to grab this one, which is emerald green, and we're just going to see how this looks. Spritz a little bit of water onto my palette, pick up that water, and then begin mixing these together. Now, if you're wondering why I use these instead of watercolour, in my opinion, they are relatively easy to use. So if you're a little bit nervous about using watercolour, then you might want to give these a go because the control is slightly better. Now, Inktense pencils won't lift off when they're dry, but this will. It's very similar to watercolour, okay? So we're going to start off by working wet and wet, much like watercolour. So we're going to just put this on straight over the lantern base, this section of it. So we're just going to add water where we want to drop that pigment in a moment. So that's all we're doing, wet and wet. This is an A6 sized postcard. You can use whatever size you want to. Once you've let that sink into the paper for a moment or two, and it depends on what kind of climate you're in. If it's obviously a warm room or a hot climate, it's going to dry quite quickly. I'm going to add a little bit more water to this, and I'm just going to put this on this side. Now remember, this is just our base layer, and we're going to be building on this as we work through. And then I'm going over to the more greeny bluey one, and we're going to drop this on this side along with another bit of that. So we're just going to apply it to the pencil line and release that brush. The amount of layers you can get with these is incredible. So like I said, if you're a little bit nervous about using watercolour, then give these a try. And they're very portable. If you like painting out and about, they're great for that too. So they're easy to pack away without them rattling around in a watercolour tin. Just going to put a little bit more yellow. Picking that up. Remember, we're not going to look for colour accuracy at this point. We're just applying it onto the paper to get our base layer in, so that we can build that once it's dry, much like we do with watercolour. So taking it to that pencil line, use your favourite brush and your favourite paper, and then I'm just taking it into these little sections here. That's wet on dry. And then just let that settle into the paper. You can see you've got this lovely blurred look like you do with watercolour. Let me just run through the colours that I've chosen with you while we're waiting for that to dry. I've got turquoise blue, I have a black, ultramarine, brown, and the two colours I've already chosen, of course, are yellow and yellow green. So just a few colours, and you can buy them, like I said, individually if you want to give these a try for yourself. I bought mine from Jackson's, and I will link all the materials that I'm using today underneath this video. Okay, so while we're waiting for that to dry, if you haven't subscribed to my channel already and you're enjoying this kind of content, please consider subscribing below, and you can get, if you hit that little bell on the side, you will be notified every time I upload new videos, which is usually once a week. Now we have over 200 free tutorials here on my studio. If that's something that appeals to you, then consider subscribing. We'd love to have you here as part of our growing community. I've gone slightly outside the pencil line here. I'm using an eradicator brush. This is from Rosemary & Co, and that will just remove that line. If you've bought my brush set from Craft & Mo, if you've been following me for a while, you'd have heard me talk about this brush an awful lot. It's my blender brush, part of my set. At the moment we're sold out, so I haven't used this today, but this is a great little brush for doing just this. But you've got the curved edge with this one. So if you have been lucky enough to snag yourself a set, then do use the blender brush, which is part of that. Okay, but as we are now sold out, you can grab yourself these from Rosemary & Co. They're very inexpensive. I think they cost about I think they're only about £3 or £4. So head over. Like I said, I will link everything below. We're just waiting for that to dry now, and then we can carry on with this section here. The other video that I did using these, I will put on the top of your screen. We did a leaf. We've also done a really pretty yellow rose, and I'll pin that one now. So you can check those two out if you like using this medium after you've watched this video. While we are waiting for this to dry, we do have a paid membership level of Patreon where we paint botanical paintings every month, and they are much more in depth. I write them just for my patrons, and we do just use watercolour, not any other water-based medium, by the way. But if you are looking to level up your watercolour skills and even have some one-on-one time with me, depending on the level of membership that you choose, why not take a look at Patreon? We'd love to see you there, and it's a way that you can support my channel. Let's take a look at what you get. When you join Patreon, you will have access to exclusive content that you just won't find here on YouTube. Whether you're a seasoned artist or just dipping your brush into botanical watercolour, you may want to join us here on Patreon, where the magic happens. And with Patreon's new collections tab, it makes accessing the tutorials super easy. When you join us here on Patreon, we dive deep into the art of botanical watercolours, from vibrant blooms to fine detail, and I'm here to guide you every step of the way. We have 3 membership levels to suit your skill and budget, and we even have a mentorship and coaching level, so if you're serious about developing your skills, then this could be the level for you. And now you can join Patreon for free, which will give you access to all of our YouTube traceables, which will be delivered weekly to your inbox, so no more scrolling through for the images. So if you are ready to embark on a watercolour adventure, unlock exclusive content, and join a community that celebrates the beauty of botanicals, hit that join button, which I will link in the description. Even join Patreon at any time, and like I said, we'd love to see you there, and it's a great way to improve your watercolour skills. On the back of that, it's important that you know that all our tutorials here on YouTube are full length. You don't need to join Patreon to join in with these. It's my gift to you so that you can join in with us here on well, we used to be called The Wonders of Watercolour. We're now at my studio. I'm Ray Campbell. So we've got to let that dry and we'll be right back. Okay, so this is completely dry now, so we can start to think about building up our layers. But of course, before that, I want to just add a bit of colour to the stem and the bits coming out here. If I was going a little bit too fast when I was reading out the colours there, don't worry, because I will write them in the description box underneath along with everything else that I'm using today, so you don't have to worry. So looking at the stem, we've got the same colours as before, only this time I'm just going to pick them up from my palette here. We've got some paint left over or some pigment left over, but I maybe just add a tiny bit of yellow. So everything will be in the description box underneath, okay? And a little tip, you might just want to add, I'm slightly out of shot there with my water, but I've got a small puddle of water here just to add to these. It just makes better control. It means that you're not adding too much from your jar, and it just means that you can pick up the correct amount. So we're starting off with a yellowy tone. So I'm going to go on with this first of all. It's very, very bright. This time, of course, we're wet on dry, and wet on dry means that we're adding the pigment directly onto the paper without wetting it first. So it gives you, again, a little slightly more control, and it's greater for smaller areas. I like using wet and wet at the beginning when I'm having a sort of larger area to paint. So we can just go on with this. And then as we come to the top, just adding a bit of water to the emerald green. That's already got a tiny bit of yellow in it, don't forget. And then we're going to go over these, that's perhaps a little bit too green, with this brush. So we are now able to layer these up in the way that we layer with watercolour. They are slightly more creamy in consistency to watercolour, and they are a little bit more opaque, but only a little bit. I discovered these a couple of years ago and I really enjoy using them. This bit coming around here is a different colour, so we're going to leave that one. We'll put some brown later on, so I'm just going to get that on like that. Then I'm going to go in again with the green, so you just scribble it on there, or like I said, you can scribble it onto some watercolour paper. So you can do this and pick it up from there, okay? You don't have to have one of these, you can still pick it up from your watercolour paper, but you will obviously get better results from using a palette like this. And I'm going to go down the underside of this. That will just add a bit of contrast, and again on here. So they blend together really nicely, and we're going over this bit as well. I'm just leaving a gap in the middle, cleaning my brush like that. Going to go and pick up a little bit more of this darker colour, and again I'm just going to drop in just a tiny bit. And that's our base colour. For this bit, I'm adding a tiny bit of brown to the mix, and I'm switching down brushes. I'm going to use my number 2 from the same range. This is the number 2 size Snowdrop Pointed Round, again from Rosemary. Picking up a little bit of that brown and mixing it in with a little bit of this green. So we've got a muted tone there, and I'm going to go in with the brown to start with. If you've got my brushes from Craft-A-Mo, use the number 4. So you can see how I'm controlling that paint. Move this out of the way by just sort of pushing it into the paper like this. And you've got full control this way. So it's a slightly smaller brush size. And then I'm going back to the green. And we're just dropping in that at the top. So you're just moving it around and letting it blend into that colour. And I think on the painting I've done it like that. So now that this is dry, let's take another look at these sections. So we can still pick up this pigment. The great thing is, of course, you can reuse this colour when it's on your palette. You can start to just mix a few more pigments together. I've picked these two colours because I thought it might be a nice idea to see if we can mix our own green as well. You can either mix them on the palette like this, or as I said, by mixing them up on the watercolour paper. So you can create darker greens, and I picked the reason why I've chosen this is because I wanted a darker value on the underside of this. So we're going to go in again with this mix of green. So we've got ultramarine, this beautiful blue colour here, with yellow. So of course we know that yellow and blue make green. So we're just going to put that on. Looking at the underside of this, tonal values are also very important when we're painting. So it's not just a solid colour that we're after, but this beautiful darker value. Cleaning my brush, patting it dry. I'm just going to flip this around so that it's facing me. And then what I'm going to do is take this brush and just tickle the edge to soften that edge. Okay, same again. So you can blend them in the way that you can blend watercolour. I'm just going to let that settle in. Mix those together, and again I'm just going to do another line here to brighten it up. So we've got a solid base on which to work, and we can work on these one by one. So what we're going to do now is activate that pigment again and work on these one by one. So at the top we have a slightly more yellow, bringing it down. Just want to activate a little bit more of that yellow tone. So we've got a kind of yellowy colour on the outside. It's a yellowy greeny colour, okay? There's lots of different shifts here. So this is our second layer, and then I'm going to add a watered down version of that emerald next to it. We can work in sections now because we've got that shape in place. So we're going over that initial colour and then using my brush to blend them in. Look how blendable these colours are though. And again, you get that control that, you know, you might find easier than watercolour. So I'm going to add a bit more yellow, activate the pigment. Right, so I'm just going to take this yellow and we're going to go over here, all over this section with yellow and a little bit of that green tone. So we're using just a handful of colours today. I know that many of you really enjoyed the leaf tutorial that I did a week before last, and a few people over on our Facebook group asked for more, so here we are. By the way, if you haven't joined our Facebook group, please consider joining us there because we are a fantastic community. I know oftentimes people can be put off by Facebook groups, but we are so heavily looked after and monitored by our team. We have a zero negativity policy. You can share your finished paintings with us and also have access to some of our older outlines because we used to put the older ones on there. So take a look and you can be part of our fantastic community. Like I said, we have a zero negativity policy in place. So check us out. I have actually gone over that, so picking up some of that colour and I'm just dropping it in this area here. So that was the yellow and the blue, and just going to let that sink in. So you can see already that this is really taking shape by just a couple of layers there, and all we need to do now is let that settle into the paper. I'm just going to glaze over this with another yellow wash and we're going to let that dry, and once it's dry we can start to add a lot more detail. If you are enjoying this video so far, could I ask you to hit the thumbs up button underneath here? It's a way of letting YouTube know that you're enjoying what you see and I can continue to bring you this free content every week. I'll be back in a minute. So here is where we left things. Everything is completely dry now, so I can safely go over this with another layer. And this is what we're all about here. Now there are a couple of ways that we can use these. Well, a few ways actually. We can scribble the pigment onto watercolour paper and pick it up from there. We can pick it up from here. Or of course we can apply directly onto the painting itself, even when there are lots of different layers on there. So just to show you what I mean, and to show you how great these are for layering, I'm going to just scribble a little bit of this lemon yellow. It's actually called, this is just a plain yellow, and I'm going to take this over the stem because I do feel it's got a really bright yellow vibrant hue. I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you. So I've applied this onto the dry pigment like that. Then we're going to add some water, picking up the plain water with my number four brush, and you can see by activating that pigment we're getting a really bright vibrant colour payoff here. Whatever's left on the brush, I'm going to be taking over some of these just to brighten up one or two of them. We are working with very bright colours today, and what this does, not only does it brighten up that colour, but it unifies everything that we have. I'm going to do the same on this section because there's a lot of yellow on there. Straight onto the paper, but this has to be completely dry. It can't be damp, it has to be totally dry. If it's damp, it will stick and it just won't look right. So that's just with the pigment dry, and then when we add the water, the magic happens. So you can see that really lifts that colour. I'm going to take what's left on the brush over this bit here. So if you're really looking for a great way to get to know these pigments and how they perform on paper, don't be frightened to play around with them like this, okay? So I'm just going to activate that to brighten up that. So what we've effectively done is glaze that colour on top. So we can just use our brush with a little bit of water just to merge that through. You can see you're in complete control of these, all right? So I'm just going to let that settle in a minute. While I'm waiting for that to dry though, I'm going to utilise these colours again. So we're going to put a little bit of that green, this time with, I think we're going to add a little bit of blue, and then we can pick up the yellow as well. So to these darker values, we're just mixing them together, much in the way that we would with watercolour, and I'm just going to drop this in the middle just to add a bit of a pattern that we see, okay? We're not going to be super accurate today. As always with these, it's all about getting to know your pigments and seeing how they perform. And with that damp brush, we're just going to soften that in. Switching down to my number 2. I'm just going to go over this just to add a bit of colour. And just drop that in. And we can go down one side of this and the small section that we have on the top here. We do have this darker value down the bottom. Again, I'm going to add, I think, a tiny bit of brown and a tiny bit of that bright green. And we can mix them together. By putting the colours separately on the palette like this, you have, you know, a decent amount of control. Actually, I'm changing my mind. What I'm going to do next, just wipe that down. I'm going to mix another blue, another green. So we'll have yellow with ultramarine again. And that gives us this dark blue colour that we put on before. We're going to accentuate that. I'm going to put a little bit more yellow. You're in control. Remember, you can add however much you want to, and if you want to lighten the colour, you just need to add water. I'm just going to drop this in kind of around this area while it's still sort of semi-wet, because we've got this darker shadow underneath which makes it look a little more realistic. And here I'm just patting that in just here and there where we've got this separation line here. I'm just taking it there, just here and there. You can see where I'm applying that colour. Okay. It's sort of semi-dry, so it's blurring it a little bit. You can see how it's spreading out, which is kind of what we want. And I might just take a tiny bit to the bottom bit here. And to the underside of this. So just let it do the work for you. Just like that. Cleaning my brush and my water and patting it dry slightly out of shot there, and I'm just blending that in to the existing wash. So we've got a lovely blur there, just like that. And we've kind of got a line coming down here. So I'm just using my tip of my brush just to create a soft line here. So you can see it's looking more three-dimensional now. We've got those darker values in. So one thing I'd like to do is just add a little circle here and some darker colours underneath here. I'm going to add a tiny bit of black and pick up the colour that I've got on my palette. I'm going to mix a tiny bit of black in with that, and what I'm going to do is add some detail now. So I'm going to switch around, taking my brush, and you can see there's almost an outline. So I'm just going to pat and take this around. If you find it's a bit too dark, take a bit more green, and you're literally outlining like this. It has actually got a little bit of brown in it, so I'm going to just put a tiny bit of that, and I'm mixing this colour up with a bit of water and taking it into the existing wash. So we're taking this to the outside edge. Because we've got a good strong pencil line, all we need to do is follow that line. So where we've got this line coming up, we can start to just draw around a squiggly line. Just here and there. You see where the paint is wet, it actually behaves a lot better. It's meant to be blurry like this, so we can do that. And you know, it's a good way of tidying up any edges that might look a bit untidy. Maybe you've slightly gone outside the pencil line, so you can use this opportunity to smarten up that edge. And again here, just coming down. Nice and easy. And you can add a few darker values here and there if you want to. Just be okay. You can even add an extra line. So just by using a few colours, we've achieved a lovely, gentle shape. Cleaning my brush and then using that damp brush just to blend those together. I'm going to take a bit of green, the bright green, with some yellow, making sure that my brush is clean and just activating that. And I'll apply this a bit more green, just applying this down the section here. So once you get used to the handling of these, they're really easy to use, and honestly such a joy, because sometimes you might not want to get your watercolours out. Just adding a bit more green. You can see how buildable they are. And let me see. I've added this colour in, we haven't used it so far, so let's put it in. Mix another green. Much brighter. You can see the opacity of that. I mean, they do layer up very nicely, but there's no denying that they are a little bit more opaque than watercolour. So this is a great colour to kind of put here. And also here, a bit more blue. So you can get lots of layers on. And with a damp brush, just blend that in. Some yellow with a lot of water, So we've got a lovely watery mix of that yellow, and I'm going to just take this over the entire thing. Just to soften out some of those lines. And there we have a really, really simple way of using these colours. It's not photorealistic, it's not meant to be. This is all about getting to know the best way to use these colours and create little test pieces that you can be proud of. We've used just a handful of colours today. Just these here, the Caran D'Ache Neocolor II Aquarelle. They're essentially watercolour pastels. You apply onto your paper or onto your palette, activate them with water. The possibilities are endless. You do seem to really enjoy these little pieces. So join in and have some fun. Grab the reference photograph and the free outline over on Patreon. Completely free, my gift to you, so that you can join in with me here. Remember, join our Facebook group, show us your finished works, and it's a great way of gaining confidence of posting your work and having some feedback. It will all be positive. That's what we're all about in the community that I've grown over the past 5 years. So I'd love to see you over there. Thank you so much for watching this lovely little piece come together. It's all fun today and just practicing and, like I said, getting used to these Neocolor IIs. I hope you've enjoyed them as much as I have. Thank you for watching. My name is Ray Campbell, and I'll see you next time.